Move her card, the Duke of Foxhollow said, without lifting his eyes from the seating plan. Put her below the kitchen staff. That will do. Mr. Ordway, who had served 3 dukes and buried 2 of them, did not move at once. Below that, your grace, Miss Wetherall has sat at the family table these 6 Christmases. Then she has sat there long enough. Tristram heard how it sounded. He heard it the way a man hears a stone go through glass, an instant too late, and with a thin ringing afterward that no apology could stop. But Ordway had already taken up the little painted card with her name on it, and the Duke of Foxhollow was not a man who repeated himself, and so the thing was done at 9:30 on the morning of Christmas Eve, in a warm room that smelled of ink and beeswax. He told himself it was necessary. 2 nights earlier at cards, Lady Perriman had turned her rings on her fingers and observed to the whole table that Foxhollow was an eccentric house, since it kept a steward's daughter at its elbow and let her pour the tea as though she were somebody. She had said it pleasantly. That was the art of it, and Tristram, who had answered 100 insults in his life with a look that ended conversations, had said nothing at all, because a worse thought had arrived first, that people were speaking of Jessamine Wetherall and himself in the same breath, and that a woman with no fortune and no family left could be destroyed by such talk, while he walked away from it untouched. So he would end the talk. He would place her where the county could see exactly what she was to him, which was nothing, and the whispering would starve for want of feeding, and she would be safe. That was the reasoning. He turned it over all morning, and it held, the way a rotten board holds, until a man puts his weight on it. The great hall at Foxhollow was ready by 4. 60 feet of oak table, and above it the rooms beamed with holly and ivy and pale ropes of mistletoe, and every window sill banked with fur, until the whole room smelled like a wood in frost. Jessamine had done that. She had done it every year since she was 19, standing on the library steps with green in her hair, arguing gently with the gardeners about proportion. Nobody arriving that evening would know it. They would only think the hall handsome, and say so to him. His aunt came down at 5, Lady Alverby, 71 years old and upright as a fire iron. She looked at the table a long while. "You have made a mistake," she said. "I have made a seating plan." "Yes," she said, "that is what I meant." The guests came in a rattle of carriage wheels and cold air, 40 of them, furred and jewelled and delighted with themselves. Tristram stood at the foot of the stair and received them and heard nothing they said. He was watching the far door. She came in at 6:30 in her grey silk, the good one, the only one, with her mother's small garnet cross at her throat. She was 25, and there was nothing about her that shouted. She had a quiet, steady face and hands that were never idle, and when she smiled at old Mrs. Farrow from the almshouse, the smile went all the way up into her eyes. Then she found her card. Tristram, 40 feet away, saw the exact moment. She did not gasp. She did not look for him. That was the part he would remember afterward, on a great many sleepless nights. She did not look for him, not once, because she already knew whose hand had done it. She simply stood a half-second longer than a person stands, and her fingers closed on the painted card, and then she walked. It was a long room, the high table first, with its silver and its candelabra, then the county's lesser gentry, then the tenant farmers, who were good men and knew her and half rose as she passed, then the upper servants, and then past the great screen where the draught came in from the passage, a plain bench end with her name upon it, below the cook and the cook's people, below the boy who turned the spit. She sat down there in her grey silk and put her hands in her lap and did not weep. Somebody laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, only a startled one, a young man who did not know where to put himself. Lady Perriman did not laugh. Lady Perriman looked down the table at Tristram with warm approval, the way one looks at a dog that has finally learned its trick, and inclined her head to him, and he felt something turn over in his chest that he would afterward identify as shame. "You will not fetch her," Lady Alverby said beside him. It was not a question, it would make a scene. It would make amends, his aunt said, and shook out her napkin and did not speak to him again for 2 hours. The dinner went on. 90 candles, and goose, and a soup with almonds in it, and the tenants growing merry, and somebody's daughter singing rather flat. Tristram sat at the head of his own table, and could not have said one word that was spoken to him. Twice he looked down the hall past the screen, and twice he saw her listening courteously to the cook's sister, and once he saw her lean sideways to say something that made the spit boy laugh. He remembered her father then, which he had been avoiding. Nathaniel Wetherall had been steward of Foxhollow for 30 years and had died in a February ditch getting a lamed horse out of the flood water, and Tristram's own father had let it be put about afterward that the accounts had been muddled. Because a dead man is a convenient place to put a mistake. Tristram had known that for 11 years. He had never said it aloud. He had given the man's daughter a room in the house instead, and told himself it was generosity, and never once considered that a room is a poor exchange for a father's name. The carol came at 9. It was an old Foxhollow tune, sung in that hall since before anyone's grandmother, and Jessamine had spent 3 weeks teaching it to the tenants' girls, and by long custom she began it. She did not begin it now. Nobody knew who ought to. It started raggedly in 3 places at once and fell apart in the second verse, and they laughed and let it go, and Tristram sat with his hand around a glass and felt the ringing in the glass go on and on. Then the pudding came in. They carried it up the length of the hall in a blue crown of flame, and everybody stood, and the fiddler struck up, and 40 people turned to look at the light. Tristram did not look at the light. He looked down past the screen at a bench end where nobody was sitting. Her napkin lay folded, properly folded, squared at the corners, the way a woman folds it who has been taught that the house's linen is not her own. Across the clean plate somebody had laid a single sprig of holly. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself she had gone up early with a headache, that she would come down in the morning and pour the tea, that there was no cause on earth to leave a hall in the middle of Christmas, and no possible place for her to go at 10 o'clock on a winter night. He was Duke of Foxhollow. He was the second wealthiest man in 3 counties. He stood in his own bright hall with the fiddling and the flame-guttering blue on the pudding, and he could not have told anyone, then or later, why he did not sleep that night at all. The room under the east gable was bare by morning. Not stripped, not disordered, bare and clean and aired, the bed made up with the counterpane squared, the grate swept, the water in the ewer thrown out. 6 years of her life had left almost no mark, because she had never once let herself spread into that room as though it belonged to her. On the writing table lay the still-room key, the linen inventory in her small upright hand, and 1 folded letter. Tristram read it standing up in his shirt-sleeves in the cold. She thanked him. That was the whole shape of it. She thanked him for the room and the 6 years and the use of the library, and said that she had this morning taken the mail coach, and would trouble Foxhollow no further. She asked, if it was not too much, that the green Ovid on the 3rd shelf be given to Betsy Croker at the mill, who was learning to read and had a good ear for it. She hoped his grace would have a blessed Christmas. She had signed it with her name only, no flourish, and she had not accused him of one single thing. He would have preferred to be cursed. Anyone may recover from a curse. He rode to the village before the frost was off the hedges. The mail had gone at 6. She had taken it north, the innkeeper said, uncomfortable, not meeting his eye, north to Aldenmore, where a cousin of her mother's kept a school, and she had paid her own fare out of a purse she counted twice. Foxhollow was unbearable after that, which surprised him, because he had expected it to be merely quiet. The garlands went brown, and nobody thought to take them down. The tenants came at quarter day and were perfectly civil and would not stay to drink. He discovered, in the way a man discovers a room in his own house he has never entered, what she had been doing for 11 years. The widow's coal, ordered every October in his name and paid out of a fund, she had made from the sale of the still-room's honey. The fever nursing in the mill cottages the year the water went bad, the whole of the bailiff's ledger, kept in her hand for 4 years because old Mercer had gone blind and was too proud to say so, and she had covered for him and never told a soul, and Tristram had signed those pages himself. Monthly, without ever wondering why the writing was so neat. In January he said it aloud to his aunt, because it had grown too large to carry. I put her below the kitchen staff to protect her. Lady Alverby set down her cup. You put her there to protect yourself, she said. You did not care what the county said of her. You cared what it said of you. And you performed a cruelty, Tristram, for the approval of people you do not even like. He did not answer. There was nothing in the world to answer with. He went north in February. Aldenmore was a mill town under a sky the colour of dishwater, and the school was 2 rooms over a chandler's shop with a stove that smoked. He stood in the doorway in a greatcoat worth more than the building and heard her voice through the partition, patient, reading out a psalm, correcting somebody's vowel with a kindness that had no condescension anywhere in it. When the class went out, she saw him, and her face did what faces do when a person is being brave. It settled. "Your Grace, may I sit at the back?" he said, "until you are finished." He sat at the back. He was a tall man on a bench built for 9-year-olds, and he sat there for an hour and a half. Afterward he said it plainly, because he had rehearsed nothing and found that he did not want to. He said that he had done it deliberately, that he had known what it would look like, that he had done it because he was a coward about talk. He said that her father had never muddled a shilling of Foxhollow's money, and that his own father had let the county believe otherwise, and that he had known that at 19 and said nothing for 11 years. He said he had no right to ask her for anything. "Then do not ask," she said. Her voice shook once and steadied. "I have made a life here, sir. It is a small one. It is mine. I know it. You do not," she said. "You have never in your life had a thing that was only yours because you earned it." He went back to Aldenmore the following week, and the week after that. He brought the green Ovid the first time, for Betsy Croker, he said, and would she see it sent, and stayed an hour. In March he came with a paper from the county registry and the vestry minutes of 11 years before, and the sworn statement of old Mercer. And he read them at the Foxhollow quarter day before every tenant on the estate, that Nathaniel Wetherall's accounts had been found sound, that the fault had lain elsewhere, that the late Duke had been in error and the present Duke had been in silence, which was worse. He had it printed. He had a stone cut and set in the churchyard with her father's name on it and 30 years of service under it. He did not tell her he had done it. She read it in the county paper and wrote him 4 lines, and he carried them in his coat until they went soft at the folds. In April he asked her to come and look at the almshouse plans, because there was no one else who knew what the old women actually needed, and she came and stayed 2 days and went back to Aldenmore. In June she came for a week. In August the school got a proper roof and a stove that did not smoke, and an endowment from a benefactor whose name the trustees were not at liberty to disclose, and Jessamine wrote him 7 lines about it, 6 of them severe. In September, walking up from the ford with the light gold across the water meadow, he said, "I have been trying to earn something. I know what you have been doing. It is not a bargain," he said. "You owe me nothing. If you tell me to go, I will go, and the school keeps its roof and your father keeps his stone, because those things were never the price of you." She stopped on the path. The wind moved the barley. "Say the rest of it," she said. "I love you," said the Duke of Foxhollow. "I loved you across a hall of 90 candles while I was in the act of shaming you, and I have never once in my life been so ashamed of anything. Marry me. Not this year, if you would rather, but marry me." She was a long time answering. Then she put her hand in his, which she had never done, and he found it was rough now from the school and the coal scuttle, and he held it as if it were the last warm thing in England. They were married at Foxhollow Church in the last week of November, quietly, with the tenants filling the pews and Lady Alverby weeping in a manner she afterward denied. At Christmas the great hall was banked with fir again, and the roof beams laced with holly, and 60 feet of oak tables set for 100. Lady Perriman came and was seated a long way down and said nothing at all about eccentric houses. Tristram had written the card self that year. Every one. He had sat up 2 nights over them with a bad pen, and the one at the head of the table, at his own right hand, said only Jessamine, because he had discovered he could not write Duchess of Foxhollow without his hand shaking, and because the whole point of it was that she had never needed a title to be worth the seat. When she came in, the tenant farmers stood. Then the gentry stood, because the tenants had. Then the servants at the screen, the cook, and the boy who turned the spit. The carol went right that year. She began it, as she always had, and the hall came in behind her like a tide, and the Duke of Foxhollow sat at the head of his own table with his wife's hand under his, and thought that a man may spend 40 years learning what a room is for.